Israel is preparing its ground offensive in Gaza, this while world leaders are struggling to find ways to de-escalate the conflict, provide humanitarian assistance to civilians, and accelerate the release of the hostages. Here's all we need to know about the latest developments in Israel. Israeli ground offensive of the war-battered Palestinian enclave appeared imminent as formations of Israeli tanks and other military equipment were seen positioning around Gaza's border in southern Israel. Palestinians say that they had received renewed warnings from Israel's military to move from North Gaza to the south or the Strip. The warning added that they could be identified as sympathizers with a terrorist organization if they stayed put. More than 35,000 Palestinian refugees are now taking shelter at a tent camp in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. The situation is still devastated for these refugees, and according to UNICEF official, 1 million children in Gaza need urgent protection. At the same time, the Pentagon has moved to step up its military readiness in the region. It is ordering activation of air defense systems throughout the region and alerting additional U.S. forces that they may be deployed soon. U.S. Secretary of State, that's U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, said in a statement that the moves were in response to recent escalation by Iran and its proxy forces across West Asia. Austin, however, did not say how many additional U.S. troops would be deployed to that region. Israeli aircraft struck a compound beneath a mosque in West Bank in Jenin. Israel said that it was being used by militants to organize attacks. Israel claimed that dozens of Hamas terrorists were killed during the overnight raids that they launched inside the Gaza Strip. Also, what we know is that Hamas has said that at least 55 people were killed in an overnight raid on the Gaza Strip. Hundreds of demonstrators, including family of those missing after the October 7th Hamas attacks, protested in central Tel Aviv, demanding the government to take immediate action to return their loved ones being held hostage by Hamas. Hamas had earlier claimed that they were willing to release 2 more hostages on humanitarian grounds, but that Israel declined to receive them. Israel replied on the comment, saying that it was propaganda. Also today, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, that's China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, on a phone call with his Malaysian counterpart, said that China will always support the legitimate aspirations of Arab and Islamic countries. Wang Yi's call to Sabri Abdul Qadir came as China continued to actively engage senior officials and diplomats around the world in an effort to mediate the crisis. Earlier, a peace summit was held in Egypt's capital, Cairo, to discuss the Israel-Hamas conflict. It aimed at de-escalating the conflict and providing humanitarian aid for civilians in the Gaza Strip. While Arab and Muslim states called for an immediate end to Israel's offensive, Western countries mostly voiced more modest goals, such as humanitarian relief for civilians. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres made a visit to Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza in a bid to get aid flowing into Gaza. He talked about the visit.
Yesterday, I went to the Rafah border crossing. There I saw a paradox, a humanitarian catastrophe playing out in real time. On the one hand, I saw hundreds of trucks teeming with food and other essential supplies. On the other hand, we know that just across the border there are 2 million people without water, food, fuel, electricity, and medicine. Children, mothers, the elderly, the sick. Full trucks on one side, empty stomachs on the other.
On Saturday, 20 trucks carrying aid crossed into Gaza. This is the first convoy of humanitarian supplies since Israel began its siege 12 days ago. As the conflict escalates, residents of northern Israel and both sides of Israel-Lebanon border are now fearful of a second front of conflict escalating. This comes as Israel said its aircraft struck Hezbollah targets in Lebanon on Saturday and that one of its soldiers was hit by an anti-tank missile. The Iran-backed group said that the strike killed 6 of its fighters. Israel is facing strong opposition from the United States, which also fears a two-front war, which would risk igniting a major regional conflict. And for more on this, we earlier spoke to Irina Suckerman, who is a Middle East analyst and a human rights activist. And this is what she had to say.
There was not a particular point to the summit other than to try to diffuse some of the heated rhetoric that has emerged from the international community over the conflict in the recent days, in particular in reaction to the Gaza hospital incident, where many of the world leaders rushed to blame Israel. And I think that the summit was more of a reaction to that incident and to the absolute insanity of riots that arose in the aftermath of that incident, and try to basically diffuse the tensions. I don't think it was meant to come up with any sort of particular solution, because any solution would necessitate the sort of action that the international community is not ready to take. It would mean working together with Israel to dismantle Hamas as a political organization. The Arab League has been completely counterproductive to this process. For years, they have complained about Hamas being a Muslim Brotherhood-driven Islamist organization. Nevertheless, when there was an opportunity, they never took it to take any action to pressure Hamas to work to dismantle Hamas and to help provide better leadership for the residents of Gaza. Instead, they put the onus of responsibility entirely on Israel, as if Hamas is only Israel's problem. So it's an international problem, not only of Israel's problem. And the West has arguably repeated many of the similar mistakes. They continued funding Hamas through various NGOs, and they continued introducing funding for insightful, hateful content, educational content that has been used to indoctrinate generations of young Gaza residents and made them perfect recruits for violence and terror. They have not provided any helpful political solutions, and they have essentially allowed Israel to end up being the only country having to deal with Hamas directly. Now both the Arab League and the West pretend to be shocked that Israel has to take military action to defend its interests, and that it comes at a high civilian cost to the Gaza residents. But they should not be shocked. This is only to be expected, and this is a direct result of their contributions. That threat is not a result of that one particular attack. I think that threat is a result of Iran's encirclement strategy against Israel, and its strategy of spreading its network of proxies around the world. We have seen that Houthis have tried to attack Israel from Yemen. We are seeing Iraqi militias that have already attacked the US troops. We have seen the RGC contingent in Syria. We have seen Russia engage in training with Syrian military. While all of this is happening as a very strong message of support to this proxy network. And of course, Hezbollah is right there watching very closely to see whether or not Israel goes into Gaza and to what extent the Gaza ground operation weakens Israel forces or not. And so all of these, what happens next is very much contingent on whether Israel proves to be very strong in its response in Gaza. The deterrence value is not measured just by the Gaza operations, but whether Israel can send a message to the other proxies.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.